Story 1. A 1% end-of-year bonus when my peers received 7% was the final straw. The justification for the smaller bonus was that I had taken a scheduled vacation during a peak period. I walked out of my manager's office fuming, promptly packed up my belongings, and submitted my resignation. Story 2. Two people died suddenly at their desks within weeks of each other. I had a breakdown driving home one day after work and had to pull over because of stress. I realized I did not want to be next, so I left when I could. Story 3. The dead mouse under the freezer that nobody bothered to clean up. We had all seen it. I offered to clean it but was told the owner would handle it. He never did. It was a delicatessen. This and other hygiene and management issues prompted me to leave before something really bad happened. Story 4. My boss had me set up interviews for people to replace me. I wasn't aware that I was leaving. The joke was on him. I rejected all the good applicants. I also resigned before he had found anyone and left him without anyone to cover my shifts. He called me to ask if I could come in and cover the shifts, and I joyfully told him to go away. He was very difficult to work for. Story 5. Telling my boss that I would like to switch to the day shift because I have not seen my child in months. He tried to give me a pep talk about how we all make sacrifices for our children. Then I told him that I am literally considering committing suicide, and he said there is nothing he can do to help me. I never looked back. Story 6. The boss went on leave for weeks because her father became very ill and passed away. I came in on my days off to keep things going. She stopped by and was yelling at me when I said I was leaving to pick up my children. She asked what would happen if she did not just stop in. I told her that I was there covering for her, and since she was there, I was leaving. Story 7. Having literal panic attacks at home from trying to get through the difficult workload they left for me when they did not find anyone to cover my 6 weeks of unpaid maternity leave. They then wanted me to train my superior twice because the first one was incompetent, and they did not consider our opinions until months later. I ended up with over 8 weeks of work to catch up on and was constantly told to reprioritize tasks based on whatever issues they got themselves into, which was somehow my fault. Story 8. I tried to ask a question in an online meeting, and my boss interjected that the meeting was for specific topics and not just for making noise. I got up immediately, walked out, and never went back. My boss was a member of parliament, and I was the second assistant to leave in a few months. Shortly after, another assistant left. The office atmosphere was terrible, and I witnessed him being verbally abusive to other staff about their poor performance. Story 9. This is my last week. My son needed surgery, and my supervisor responded, "Just make sure you are at the team retreat." I knew it was time. Story 10. A friend of mine was at a digital agency that was a typical panic disaster. It was the kind of place where you could bring your dog to work, which was a good idea because you would be working until 2 in the morning on a client job several times a month. My friend was hard at work on a PowerPoint presentation when a dog fight erupted in the hall and spilled into her office. Snarling, biting, and deep growls indicating the combatants were serious. The furball eventually made its way out and down the hall after about 90 seconds. She said, I looked at myself and said, "Self, it is 12:36 at night and your skirt is covered in dog blood. We need to get out of here." She did. Story 11. I had dealt with the messed up scheduling, difficult customers, and unbelievably boring work at my grocery store job for long enough. One day, I was already having a bad day. Then I had to listen to constant music from 2 unsupervised kids in the next aisle over for over half an hour at the beginning of my shift, and it was driving me insane. Then a customer dropped a glass bottle. I couldn't find a single wet floor sign because they were all being used for the leaking deli freezers, and the few other employees did not seem to care, so I had to clean it up myself. After that, I decided I had had enough, clocked out, and left a note on the time clock saying I quit. This was in 2022 after the COVID-19 pandemic, and I was only making $12 per hour. Story 12. They had already transitioned from direct deposit to paper checks. Then, they asked me to hold off depositing my check until after the weekend. I gave my notice immediately. Story 13. I asked my manager if I could work longer hours for 1 day off per fortnight. I was in a semi-senior position within the team and always worked above and beyond, including overtime as my role was demanding. My manager said she would have to speak with her manager, which she did. He said he had no problem with it. However, it would be up to her to make the final decision. She called me and said she would not allow this because there was no reason for me to work an additional 1 to 1.5 hours in a day. I was already doing this because she assigned me work equivalent to 3 full-time employees, in addition to my actual responsibilities. I took a sick day, interviewed at the company's competitor, and quit. It was the best day and decision of my life. Story 14. When I was told I was not allowed to take vacation or be out of touch, even on my normal days off, unless I found my own coverage. If I wanted to go for a couple-hour bike ride or hike where I would not be able to respond immediately on the weekend, which were my scheduled days off, I had to find coverage. They provided no incentive for anyone to cover me, no additional pay, no time for training, and so on. Then they took away everyone's bonuses, which made up a little over 20% of my compensation. They saw no problem with this and were apparently shocked that I did. There is an amount of money for which I would do that. That is no compromise money, and this job was nowhere near that amount. Story 15. I am in accounting. I gave my boss ample notice that my first grandchild was going to be born with a tumor and would need surgery within 24 hours of birth. Because I worked remotely, I would work as I could, but I was going to be there for my son, daughter-in-law, and granddaughter to help them as needed while they were in the neonatal intensive care unit. I explained that there was no way I would be able to meet our close deadline and that he needed to mitigate that. The accounting department consisted of the chief financial officer, the interim controller, and me, so I basically did all the close entries. He promised help and understanding. On the day the surgery was happening, I was asked if we were on track to close. I said not even close, and reminded him that I had told him a month ago I could not do it alone. 2 days later, I was asked to do something illegal again with payroll. I told the interim controller that I was prepared to resign on the spot over it. He asked me to take a day to think about it because he still needed my help. He also said he would be more upset about the hours I was required to put in than the payroll issue. I told him the hours were the immediate reason for my resignation. Otherwise, I might be willing to give more notice, but I would think about it. During that day, I thought about it as requested and listed all the ways I had been asked to compromise my professional integrity during my time there. I forwarded all supporting documents for these situations to my personal email. The next morning, I sent that list and concluded the email with, "It has become clear to me that compromising my personal integrity is a requirement for employment here, and as I am unwilling to continue to do that, please consider this my immediate resignation." My email and computer access were turned off in less than 5 minutes, and it was never acknowledged in any other way. No one contacted me except to arrange the return of my computer. It was the second best decision I have ever made for myself. Story 16. I haven't left yet, but my boss came back from a funeral and immediately started speaking negatively about the deceased woman, saying she deserved to die from cancer because she was a smoker and drinker. I got back on LinkedIn the same day. Story 17. When I realized our supervisor made it a habit to blame others to save himself, I found another job before he could do the same to me. He was the reason the company had a high turnover problem. At another company in a completely different industry, I was sent to recover an abandoned semi-truck. I found a gallon bottle of vodka just sitting between the seats. It was 3/4 empty. I found everything necessary to make blunts in the sleeper compartment. As I started opening an envelope, a green powder floated into the air. I called the company and asked a simple question. If a drug detection dog came sniffing around, who would post bail? The company's safety director first asked me to transport the drug paraphernalia across the country to them. They rescinded the request when I made them realize what they had just asked me to do. Their answer to my question was, "We will have to get back with you on that." Super confident and inspiring, right? I was with another company about 2 months after that. Story 18. The boss had a meeting where he told all of us that if we were unhappy, we were welcome to leave. So I did. Story 19. They would not let me take an extra day at Easter. We could not get a flight home and had to fly back the next day. They demanded I work a shift in the city I was in, to which I laughed. We would have spent all day getting home. I just quit. Not long after, the company stopped offering the work because there was no one left who knew how to do it. Story 20. When the boss told me I was useless and that he could do a better job while he was already drunk and leaving early to go play golf. Don't ever work for family. Story 21. I am not sure what the final straw was in terms of my boss's behavior, but I knew I had reached it when I was mentally going through my options, and the worst-case scenario of being unable to find another job and ending up homeless, living in my car, was more attractive than going back to work. Story 22. My last job. My title never changed, but my hours and tasks certainly did. I was the manager of sales, working a typical office schedule from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., Monday to Friday. I managed a small team of salespeople. They handled all the sales while I managed their paperwork and ensured that deliveries and customer purchases were satisfactory. If we met sales goals, we all received bonuses, including me. That lasted for the first 3 months. My new role included all of that, plus being on the sales floor. I didn't necessarily hate this, as I thought we would make more sales and reach our bonuses faster. However, I still had to complete all the paperwork, and now I had sales goals. My schedule changed from Monday to Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., to any day, open to close. My wife and kids disliked this more than I did, and I really hated it as well. Same title, completely different role. A few months later, there were more changes. I continued doing all the paperwork, but instead of getting bonuses based on the team's performance, I was responsible only for my individual sales goals. This became difficult while managing all the paperwork. The final straw was when everyone's commission structure changed. I went from earning a 4% commission on sales to 1% if I did not meet my sales goals. Sales goals could be changed at any time by our regional manager. For example, 1 month's goal was raised from $60,000 for the whole team, which most had met, restoring our original commission, to $80,000, which only one person achieved. I was already searching for a new job, but as a final insult, my vacation request, approved months earlier with payment made, was denied the day before I was supposed to leave because the office was short-staffed and the paperwork could not be delayed. I was done with that place. Story 23. It is hard to summarize. Just know that the emergency telephone number system in the United States is largely focused on protecting the jurisdiction rather than serving the public. Once the focus shifted to compliance with protocol over timely assistance, I had to stop. Story 24. I was definitely not demoted to a different position, which was bad enough, but then every week revealed the double standards set for me versus my coworkers. I still did not leave because I was desperately trying to find work in any other field, but eventually I gave up and just quit. I found something before my savings ran out and have spent the years since reflecting on the difference that removing stress from my life caused. Story 25. They wanted me to stay at work when I had pneumonia in a kitchen. The previous year, I had lost part of my lung, required a month-long hospital stay, and surgery due to pneumonia and trying to work through it. I walked out. Story 26. Only being offered $15 an hour for full-time work with benefits. I was working on call, 24/7 during the week and weekends, designing logos, redoing pamphlets, and touching up thousands of product logos, doing secretarial work, finishing all my tasks, and helping others with their work. Promoted the products and helped officials obtain products for community events. Worked for 6 months and earned $1,000 in gross pay. When COVID-19 hit, I was given a book of logos to redo. I quit shortly after. Story 27. My boss volunteered to edit a book, basically preparing the updated edition. While other attorneys were responsible for certain chapters, he was tasked with preparing the table of contents, references, and cross-reference table. He couldn't even save a Word document, let alone do any of the above. But he knew I could. I am certified in Word, and I had been doing his work for 4 years while he took all the credit. When he came to me, saying he was going to make me famous and giving me this year-long project for no extra pay, I knew my name would not appear anywhere in it, only his name. But he kept selling it. Every judge and lawyer in our state uses this book. You'll be famous. That was untrue. The previous year, he told me I could get a raise if I billed more, then stole all my billing. Because he, as the partner, billed at a higher rate. He said it made more sense for him to take credit and that it looked bad if the paralegal drafted the pleadings instead of the attorney. Then he could draft his own pleadings, but instead, he dictated them into a cassette tape recorder and had me transcribe them, as if my 2 graduate degrees were meaningless. I never got a raise. I found a new job and gave only 4 days' notice instead of 2 weeks. The updated book was released 13 months later, slightly past the deadline, with many mistakes, requiring another update the following year instead of the usual 3 to 5 years. When the new version came out, his name was nowhere to be found. I feel bad for whoever did all the work. There is no way he did it himself, and no one else was mentioned, not even a special thanks dedication. Just as I expected. Story 28. It was a 4-person office. The manager, assistant manager, administrative assistant, and me. To give an idea of the toxicity behind his back, we referred to the manager as the boss monster from hell. I gave a 2-week notice. On the 3rd day, the assistant manager was sent to another office to fill in for a manager who had quit. On the 7th day, the administrative assistant went out to lunch and never came back. That was the 3rd time that had happened in 2 years. 2 days before my last day, we were hit with a blizzard that dumped over a foot of snow and knocked out power across the city. The boss monster called me at home and started yelling for not being in the office. I asked if the office had power and he said, "How would I know? I'm at home. I only went back to turn in my keys, fill out my expense report, and collect the check." Story 29. We hired a man to work in our store post office. He spent 15 minutes in the bathroom, took 30 minutes for a 15-minute break, and 1.5 hours for an hour-long lunch. He called in sick one day, saying the police were at his house regarding his sister. He made a mistake with a $10,000 money order by printing 10 $1,000 checks using the customer's first and middle names instead of first and last names. When it was time for cutbacks, we had to fire someone. We let go of the most competent worker in the post office, not me. Shortly after, I quit. Story 30. This was before COVID-19, but there was a flu going around that was particularly severe and causing more deaths than in previous years. I remember sitting at my desk, the only person in the office on a Saturday afternoon, receiving a rude phone call from the boss who was out on the lake in his boat. He was micromanaging my workflow and did not like something he saw that I could not change. I knew he was monitoring me via the work cameras. I thought, I wish I had the flu so I could be in the hospital instead of here. So I gathered my things from my desk, walked out, and blocked everyone's phone numbers when I reached my car so they could not persuade me to stay. It genuinely felt like heaven's gates opened for me as I drove away from that place. Story 31. My manager had an open door policy. I could come see them in their office at any time to talk about issues. They never addressed any problems, but the last straw was when I walked into their office, which had the door wide open, and caught them with meat in hand, watching inappropriate adult content. Story 32. Getting fired for writing negative comments about the manager in my private notebook that I left at work before taking a day off. I knew I had a case when the manager called to fire me for that reason. Then the head manager called to say the firing was for unrelated reasons to cover their mistake. I did not have the strength to fight it. Story 33. Having to write a website for executives to provide reasons to terminate employees, develop business cases for outsourcing, or replacing existing staff. Additionally, they required all of us to return to office in another city, move or be terminated. Story 34. The owner, a horrible and entitled woman, demanded that I visit various booths at a trade show and spread falsehoods about a woman she disliked. Story 35. Poor sales job. I was not the top performer on the team, but I was in the top 3 and the most consistent. My supervisor relied on me and frequently asked me to come in on weekends off the clock to try and secure the last sale or two. He needed to meet the quota for the week when the team was struggling. We were in a crunch on a Friday, and I had a client who was undecided. We had to run background checks on everyone we brought onto the service, and the rules had recently changed regarding the amount of information required, but some sales were still being processed with the old information during the adjustment period. I had a client ready to go, but he did not want to provide all of the information, social security number versus last 4 digits. My supervisor was listening to the call and instructed me to process the sale with just the last 4 digits, so I did. The sale went through. A week later, the sale was removed from my count, and my supervisor informed me that he was sorry, but he had to write me up for cutting that corner, stating that I should have known the new policy by then. I was placed on a performance improvement plan. This occurred 1 month after my supervisor's manager had identified me as a managerial candidate and had me attending after-hours manager training. This would have meant I would be taken off my supervisor's team and a replacement would be hired if I got the promotion. The performance improvement plan meant I could not apply for any other position until 6 months after it expired. I completed the plan, and 6 months later it was midsummer, the worst time of year for sales. While there was a quota, more than half the company rarely met it. It was generally accepted. Someone making virtually no sales would be dismissed, but if you were reasonably close every week, no one would challenge you. I was still in the top 3 on the team during the slow season, but I missed the quota by 1 sale that week. The next morning, my supervisor approached me and placed me on another performance improvement plan for low performance. I called in sick the next day, the following day, and on the 5th day, I informed him via text that I was not coming back. I had taken most of my belongings home the day he put me on the plan, only leaving obvious items like my pencil holder, file organizer, and some miscellaneous office supplies, so it was not immediately apparent I was leaving until I informed him by text. I never returned. As a postscript, I received a random check in the mail about a year later worth approximately 2 paychecks. It turned out there was a class action lawsuit against the company for encouraging employees to work off the clock. Story 36. I am about to leave my job. I just hate it. The woman who runs my department is terrible. She treats everyone disrespectfully. Recently, there was an issue where we were told about a policy that did not sit right with the staff, and someone went to human resources for clarification. The human resources manager told my department director, who confronted her. There was an aggressive meeting where my boss told the entire staff that she does not like it when people go to human resources and that it only creates division among the team. She said that if there are any questions about policy, we need to go directly to her, all while looking directly at the person who went to human resources. She also openly talks negatively about employees, has put the most incompetent people in supervisory positions because they are the most loyal to her, and has said that loyalty is more important to her than performance. She has taken company-mandated management courses and has had many complaints about mistreatment over the years because of how poorly she treats her staff, but nothing has improved. Story 37. I would say it was when I received a written warning for my handwriting, but really, I had already been searching for months before that and could not find anything. Story 38. I was an industrial maintenance field technician. I drove company trucks all over the West Coast. The trucks had a gross vehicle weight over 10,000 pounds, which subjects them to Department of Transportation monitoring and regulations. The supervisor constantly pressured us to alter or edit logs to comply. However, he never directly instructed us to falsify hours and only communicated in person or by phone. If I attempted to report it, it would be my word against his. Until one cold March morning, around 3 a.m., he sent a text with instructions that I could not follow without violating Department of Transportation regulations. I saved the text, went to our shop headquarters the next day, signed out, and never returned. Story 39. My boss screamed at me for working from home when he had been working remotely on vacation for over 5 weeks. It would have cost the company more than $1,000 for the parking fees they covered when I was in the office, and all my meetings were over Zoom anyway. But God forbid I not be in my cubicle. Human resources was ineffective, and my boss was hired due to nepotism, so I went home and never returned. Story 40. At the beginning of last year, we were told that we would be moving offices. This would make my commute almost triple in time, from around 30 minutes one way to an hour and 15 minutes at best one way. Public transit is currently almost non-existent in that area, so it would more likely be an hour and a half. There wasn't a set date at that point, as they needed to do some last-minute maintenance and didn't know when it would be completed. Many of us were concerned about the new commute times, so we expressed our concerns to The manager, who then brought it up to the owner of the company. The owner assured everyone that since we still had a warehouse with office space down the street from our current location, we would be able to remain in the area if the commute was too much. At this stage, I was already casually looking for other opportunities as I wasn't happy with the job or pay, but it wasn't an intensive search. For months, we were told the same things, that there was still last-minute maintenance and that we would be able to stay in the same area. Then one day in mid-April, we were all pulled into a meeting. The manager of the entire department, who reported directly to the owner, told us that we were all going to move to the new office with no exceptions and that they were not going to listen to any of our concerns. The manager then had the audacity to tell us that the company was flexible after an entire meeting explaining how they were not flexible. They still did not give a move date, but I knew that when we moved, it was time for me to go. I did not appreciate being lied to right to my face for months, and the owner had done other things that showed he did not value us as employees. I was not going to commute an hour and a half one way every day for an employer that so openly showed how little I was valued. They moved in mid-June, which is when I ended up leaving the company. Story 41. I work in information technology and our team was making negative numbers. More information on this coming later. So the chief executive officer started to micromanage us. While introducing micromanagement, she introduced a new way to book time. We had a good tool for booking time spent on customers with automatic systems to charge the customer for the time we spent on tasks. And we had another system where we recorded our work hours. She combined both systems. Everyone who works in information technology just knows that you cannot do this. Information technology makes money by doing multiple tasks at once, and you have to work outside regular hours. When she asked us to combine those systems, I told her exactly this. She just said, "No, we are doing it this way because I say so." I answered okay and directly went to my lawyer because I knew the system we booked our time in, and I knew that we had to alter our actual work times to be able to enter them into the system. Altering your work times is illegal in Germany. After a month, I told her again, "You are asking me to break the law right now." She did not deny it. She just said, "I told you to do it." I took my resignation out and resigned in front of the whole team. I still had to work for 3 months but refused to book time in an unlawful way. Fortunately, my lawyer is my best friend. He gave me quick answers every time I had a question. In my last month, the bomb dropped. Our team was making money, but we were also reselling licenses that we needed for our projects. It turned out the sales team that was supposed to manage those licenses just did not. They never asked the customers for money for those licenses. We were gifting the customers thousands of dollars each year. When she told us this in a meeting, everyone was silent while I started laughing. Felt so good. Story 42. Manager gave me the silent treatment for 3 days, then came in one day and said, "We need to fix this awkward atmosphere. You made it awkward." That was my last day. Story 43. I gave my boss my 2-week notice, and she said she was not accepting it and that I would not be leaving. I worked 2 weeks and did not return after the day I specified in my resignation. What do you mean no? Story 44. I asked for a single day off work 2 weeks in advance. The boss said I needed to fill out a written request, but they were out of copies of the paperwork. She was not in the office again until a week later. When I asked her then, she said it was too late and that I should have filled out the paperwork a week earlier. I stopped showing up for work on the day I said I needed off and never went back. She never called to ask why I missed work. I made it obvious without saying anything. Story 45. I worked overnight at a small hospital Starbucks cafe in Miami during COVID-19. It was half Starbucks, half Cuban cafe. I was the only white person working there, which I never had an issue with, and I got along with everyone. I was a bit different because I'm tattooed and have different colored hair. Usually, I got compliments on it. I was a lot of the hospital staff's favorite barista, and they'd wait for me to come in to make their drinks, even the Cuban coffees. I made a lot in tips, which was surprising. One day, we suddenly got a new supervisor who was also the supervisor of the cafeteria. This lady had it out for me, and I had never even met her. The work environment shifted immediately after her arrival. She required me to cover my tattoos, which I complied with by wearing long-sleeve shirts. Then she required that I cover my hair, which was magenta at the time. I complied and started wearing bonnets and wrapping my hair. It was annoying, but I didn't need to do my hair every day. My last straw was when she said I couldn't wear makeup. I always wore eyeliner and lashes. At this point, I wondered if it was even worth it. I felt targeted, and people started asking me if I had changed religions or if I was going through abuse. It was too much. A couple of weeks after I left, the manager reached out to me because she was filing a report for a hostile workplace against the supervisor and recognized that she targeted me specifically so I would quit. Story 46. It was not right to treat me the way they did, but I could choose to put up with it, and I did, sadly. When they started attacking my students and their families directly, I knew I had to leave. Story 47. I work for an engineering firm in a large city. I was promoted to a new department that required a significant amount of field work. Initially, I was fine with this, but I quickly realized that safety was not actually a priority in the field. I often had to act as foreman at sites with active methamphetamine laboratories, gangs, and unhoused individuals carrying visible firearms. I reached my limit and was laughed at in front of the entire department when I raised my concerns with my supervisors. Everything happened very quickly, but I left without hesitation after being promised a major raise, only to be told that corporate had rejected their request. After 3 days of speaking with coworkers, I learned that only 3 employees were considered for raises, and I was not one of them. Additionally, my male colleagues, who held lower titles and had less technical expertise, were making at least 50% more than I was. I am very dissatisfied with that company and its leadership. Story 48. I got a temporary layoff notice due to my department allegedly not receiving enough jobs, even though I was requesting more people to handle the jobs I was trying to secure. There was zero understanding that in my sector of business with private customers, if a customer calls and you say, "We can be there in 1 month," they will call someone else. Later, I was told in secret by the union representative that this was happening because my manager was struggling with tasks, and they were using me as a scapegoat to protect him. He quietly advised me that they wanted to remove me from my role and give me a lesser position on the floor. I also learned that all my requests never reached higher management. Luckily, I found a new job, and in Norway, if you have a temporary layoff for a certain number of days, you can resign with a 14-day notice. I went to the top boss and submitted my resignation. He said, "Well, it is a shame that your department was not able to get enough jobs." I gave a quick summary of all the things I had tried to explain and that I was requesting more qualified workers to execute jobs. He looked shocked, probably because it was new to him. I said, "It does not matter. When one door closes, another one opens," and left. I still know some people who were stuck there, and my department no longer exists. I was the one who kept it running. I also learned that the manager's friend tried to step in and was suddenly given approval for all my ideas, but since he did not understand them beyond what I had explained, he failed to execute them properly and failed overall. Story 49. My boss told me to manipulate data for an audit in our company emails. When I tactfully refused, she called and yelled at me. I lost my temper and told her I was protecting her instead of reporting the issue and getting her in trouble. She just yelled more, absolutely unrepentant and unaware of the bigger trouble she was nearly in. Story 50. People don't quit because of companies. People quit because of managers. I was with a media company in a digital studio that specialized in branded content. The problem was we had a fairly toxic manager who, 1, couldn't lead people out of a paper bag, 2, made everything 10 times more stressful than it needed to be, and 3, was obsessed with taking credit for things, among many other bad traits. We had a new client and were going to create a 30-minute special for a new product we had launched. I had already created 2 really successful specials for other clients. This time, however, she insisted that it be modeled after something similar she had produced during COVID-19 before getting this position. Mind you, her show had all of 30 views and a few comments on Facebook where it had been released, which was way below our standards. Shoot dates were coming up, and she systematically ignored or overrode all the ideas from myself and the rest of the producers and pushed her ideas on the client. I knew the whole thing was going to be a mess, and I just had no energy or desire to be involved anymore or work for someone I completely didn't respect. Plus, I had a really robust few months of external client work. So 2 weeks before we were supposed to go into production, I gave my 2 weeks notice. Fast forward 6 months. I got recruited by a headhunter to do video for a large healthcare company. The media company I had quit from fired 85% of their team, and that manager handled things with their clients so poorly that I was able to poach a large, long-term client from when I was with them. I assembled an awesome team from other good producers they let go. Fast forward 12 months. I was hired full-time by that healthcare outfit and have a thriving side hustle with good clients and good people, making more than I ever did in that toxic company. Best move I ever made. It has to be recognized that I, luckily, had a decent base of clients from my own personal company before even taking a job with the toxic manager's company, and a very gainfully employed partner. So, I understand this type of thing is not easy for everyone. But I stayed at the job a year longer than I should have and reflect on how I wasted time at a toxic place. As they say, take the leap, and the net will appear. Story 51. On day 4 of starting a new job, I was still asking what they wanted me to do, the fundamental purpose of my arriving at the office. Then other new starters started asking me what they should be doing. Finally, I was told I would be leading a meeting with a key customer the next day, having no clue what it was I did. So I went to lunch and did not go back. I still received a full month's pay. Story 52. My daughter died, and during the 2 weeks of sick leave I took, I tried to get my boss to stop ignoring my emails and texts while organizing my return to work on a part-time basis. Instead of showing sympathy or empathy for my situation, he told me, "You win the My Life Sucks award." Story 53. I worked for a First Nation band-operated school as a teacher for 15 years, and then in a mixed role including part administration as vice principal for the last 6 or 7 of those years. It was not a unionized school, so there was a lot of uncertainty, but I loved the students and considered the staff more like family with very little turnover. There was a change in community leadership, and they fired my principal and superintendent without cause. He had been doing 2 full-time positions for over a dozen years without compensation. They hired 2 people to fill his former roles, but they did not know how to do their jobs. I was teaching 6 courses in 2 periods, doing my vice principal duties unsuccessfully outside classroom hours, and handling almost all the principal's responsibilities or instructing her on what had to be done. I was extremely busy during the day and spent most evenings catching up on work. I was also the go-to person for problem solving in the school, including computer issues when support was unavailable. 6 months after she became principal, she interrupted me during a class speech to say a parent was coming in and needed 2 suspension letters typed. She paused, expecting me to offer to type them. I was instructing 4 subjects with about 15 students combined. I had to ask if she needed a blank suspension letter since I could not drop what I was doing to type for her. That is a basic administrative role. That was just one of many issues. The breaking point came after very stressful and overwhelmingly busy school days, combined with personal challenges at home, including sick dogs, plumbing problems, and family illnesses. One day, the principal closed my office door and told me leadership decided to close the high school at the end of the year. I felt numb, struggling to cope with everything and suddenly facing unemployment. That night, I started searching for jobs and applied the next day. My references were called the following Friday. I was hired by Tuesday for the next school year. When I resigned the following Wednesday, the principal left my office to start packing her things. She also resigned that afternoon. She could not do the job without me and knew it. I still cannot believe how much I tolerated to keep the school running properly. I just finished my first year at the new school and love it. I heard they fired multiple long-term staff without cause this year and sold the school building. They have not arranged a place for students to attend in the upcoming school year. It makes me shake my head and wish them good luck. Story 54. I was passed over for a promotion for which I was the most qualified, and the supervisor's friend received the promotion instead. 3 days later, I gave my 2 weeks' notice. I knew it was the right decision when I received a goodbye card with nothing written in it except the default text. It was a perfect send-off for 9.5 years of service. Story 55. I was a warehouse manager and was treated like a butler and scapegoat for the sales team's laziness. 6 grown adults constantly talked about each other like children. I got hired at a new place, never gave my 2 weeks' notice, took a 10-day vacation, and never returned. 3 other people quit within 2 weeks. Today is my second day at the new job. Story 56. My partner told me I was not the person he fell in love with after he watched me beat myself down for 2.5 years trying to make that cursed job work. I immediately applied for jobs and left within 3 months of that conversation. Story 57. Too many pop-ups, which is probably the answer, but I did not seriously start looking for a new job until my yearly review. It was just a 4-page, single-spaced opinion piece on why I was inadequate and why my boss thought I was a horrible person. There was absolutely nothing to indicate the review would be like this. Everyone said I should not be surprised by my review, and I was very surprised. I expected it to focus on my accomplishments and goals I had met and wanted to improve upon, but not even a kind word was found. There was not even a mention of all the times I covered shifts for call-outs and stepped in when my coworkers left one by one. Thankfully, I had documented all the harassment towards me over the years and all the times I responded professionally and kept my composure, even though it was total emotional abuse and gaslighting. I refused to sign my acknowledgement of the review, and it remains unsigned to this day. Now I am starting a new job in another country next week. My boss has lost almost his entire team by the end of August for various reasons. I left back in the spring, but the department was notorious for high turnover, and everyone wonders why when the entire reason was my boss. I am a librarian, so there is no reason why a boss should be that toxic. We do important work, but we are not doctors or emergency medical technicians, yet he acted as if we were. He was also racist, sexist, ageist, ableist, and discriminatory in many other ways. I took home the things that belonged to me, and whatever was left in my desk was not my problem. Story 58. I was working in a chain steakhouse when I got a job in my field. I had to give only a 1-week notice because the employee orientation was just over a week away. Before I left, the general manager pulled me aside and asked me to request my future employer to push back my orientation because they were short-staffed and really needed people to work on Valentine's Day. I went home and enjoyed a week off. When Winter Storm Uri blocked the roads, they threatened to fire me because other people came in, forgetting that those other people sometimes walked to work while I lived 15 minutes away by car. I was again threatened with termination during the COVID-19 pandemic when I had to call out to make an appointment for my first COVID-19 vaccination, as the person who said they would cover my shift backed out. No surprise, that person was also anti-vaccination. I have little affection for that place and have not set foot there since then. Story 59. Being denied tenure because I was not a good fit. I never had one negative review or observation and received glowing recommendations from peers and supervisors. However, I had the misfortune of being hired by the previous administration that was later dismissed. Out of all the people hired during those years, only 1 or 2 were kept, and they were so low in rank as not to be seen as a threat to the new administration. When asked if I wanted a recommendation to use going forward, I told them I would not need it because they truly ruined the experience of working in that field, and I would be taking time for myself. The look of shock on their faces was enough satisfaction for me. Story 60. Essentially, middle management immediately retaliated against my reports of warehouse workers using the racial slur when describing anything that mildly annoyed them. Story 61. That timing with the feedback email is just cruel. Using your grief as an opportunity to dump a year's worth of made-up complaints shows exactly who she is as a person. The dog situation tells you everything. Zero humanity when you're dealing with an actual emergency. These managers always reveal themselves eventually. You made the right call getting out. At Higher Aligned, we see this pattern constantly. Toxic managers create environments where good people quietly disappear rather than deal with the drama of confronting it. Sounds like you dodged a bullet by not staying there any longer. Story 62. My sister just got home from another waterslide attempt, and my supervisor would not let me miss a meeting because the overseas supervisors were going to be there. I was not in management, and the meeting was pointless, a meet and greet kind. Story 63. Getting no promised pay rise, then finding my colleague who had worked in the same job for much less time than me and had less experience was being promoted to assistant manager because she had an affair with one of the bosses. I loved that job, but enough was enough. Story 64. A large male customer entered the back area with his aggressive dog. The veterinary clinic staff refused to treat the dog due to its aggression. The man then threatened the all-female staff. The veterinarian attempted to ban him from the practice. Management refused to ban him and did not call the police when the man waited in his truck outside the building for hours. They also gave him a discount if he returned. This is the largest society for the prevention of cruelty to animals chain in the United States. Story 65. My boss forgot my 20th anniversary and scheduled the party on another day, then forgot again. I left within 6 months. Story 66. The owner and vice president were running the company into the ground while blaming everyone else for the revenue decreasing each month. They tried to take advantage of new California Air Resources Board emissions compliance regulations and invested all efforts and finances into providing services strictly for emissions. The owner was so uninvolved in his own business that he did not know what was going on or how to use any systems we utilized. Yet he seemed to have the answer for everything, which was that we were lazy and that the technicians should just show up, do the service no one asked for, and bill the clients. They largely overcharged for services that many of our clients eventually started training their own staff to do in order to cut down on costs and time. Many clients told us they began doing their own services, so we lost a lot of revenue. But the owner and vice president would not take no for an answer. Instead, they blamed us for the money not coming in, thinking we were lazy, not calling enough, or not trying hard enough. Their exact directive was, you need to call them like a psycho ex-girlfriend. We lost even more clients because they felt harassed by how much we called. The vice president assigned us countless small tasks in an attempt to squeeze out even more funds from clients, which took time away from our actual assignments because all tasks were treated with the same priority. Then we were criticized for not getting work done. Couple all that with enabling poor behavior from technicians, and it was a disaster. After harassing clients to schedule services, technicians showed up to work only if they felt like it. They were late or just did not show up half the time. If you attempted to correct their behavior, they would throw a tantrum, refuse to work, and complain to the owner or vice president, rendering all your hard work useless while only receiving a slap on the wrist. The vice president had us play therapist and make them feel better. Yet when we complained that we could not secure work for the technicians, we were told we had a victim mentality, needed to try harder, and were questioned if we were capable of handling our jobs. My coworkers and I would have panic attacks during our scheduled time off. I was not eating, stressed, and constantly irritable. I would be home worrying that my technicians were going to let me down by not showing up to appointments because it would be my fault. I am not religious, but I prayed that my train would break down on the way to work every day. I took a sick day, interviewed, and was offered a job the same day. Although I intended to give notice, I came back the next day, saw that my boss had forced my coworkers to harass clients who strictly wanted contact with me only, a relationship I had worked hard to build and maintain, which upset the clients. I was so stressed out that I just could not do it anymore. I sent my resignation and went home. I was only clocked in for 30 minutes. I only regret leaving my coworkers behind to deal with that. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.